Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we've seen Argylle, which has been taking a bit of a beating sort of online and critically. People don't really seem to like it. I was prepared for the worst. It's directed by Matthew Vaughn, who's previously done Kingsman, and he was also known for being Guy Ritchie's producer back in the day.
It's interesting because the films resemble Guy Ritchie films.
Yeah, how do you reckon?
What was the last film, the Guy Ritchie film with Henry Cavill as the Spider-Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Oh yeah.
Right. It's glamorous, it's slightly retro, it has ideas of Britishness, it's fast-moving, it's cheeky, or it's tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, it's fun, it's really kind of nothing serious. So I think it has a lot in common with those films, though I do think Guy Ritchie's films have more of a punch.
Yeah, I think he's a better director.
Yeah.
Although I do think for someone who began producing and has moved into directing, I do tend to I think I go into Matthew Vaughn films thinking they're not going to be very good, and I end up having quite a good time, and that was the case with this one. And there is something more to it than everyone is responding to. It's not making very much money from what I understand, although I mean the budget I think has been over-reported. It's reported this is $200 million. It can't possibly be. That I think is what Apple bought it for. It's not the same as what it cost to make. Still, it doesn't look like it's going to make very much money, and it's taking kind of a beating. So let's just say briefly what it's about. It's about this author who writes spy novels, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and her novel appears to have come to life in some sense. She writes about this spy, played in the film by Henry Cavill, called Argylle, and we see these spy scenes playing out. The film opens with a classic spy action opening. There's all sorts of kind of Bond and Man from U.N.C.L.E. and things like that going on. It turns out that spies are after her, and she's got herself embroiled in something. Any more than that would be spoiler territory. We will get into spoiler territory very quickly. I was pretty charmed by the whole thing, more than I expected to be.
I think it's a mess. I thought it was too long. I thought the cast was ill-used. And in spite of that, it had some really fun moments. Yeah. I mean,
when you get to those action scenes towards the end, especially the one where they're using smoke to cover themselves and they're shooting and they're dancing at the same time, I thought this is really imaginative and a lot of fun. It's well choreographed. I love the look of it. No one else is doing things like this.
I love the idea of it. I thought it was poorly executed.
Yeah.
And
the skating?
I loved the skating bit.
Yeah, skating was great.
That was thrilling. Actually, it was so much fun.
I was just in it, I thought if I'd been in a bad mood coming up to this, I'd have thought, wow, this is stupid. But I was in a good mood coming up to it. I was into the movie, and this was all just working for me really well. And I found it really funny and exciting and
kind of
witty.
I kind of agree with you, right? It has those things, but I think one can't get rid of the things that I thought didn't work. So, for example, the biggest star in the film is arguably Cavill, right? And John Cena. And, they're used as kind of background imaginary figures. And, particularly Cavill is meant to be the ideal imaginary version of...
Argylle, the spy?
Argylle is meant to be her ideal anyway. And then it turns out that he's sometimes shown to be the ideal of Sam Rockwell, right? Yeah, kind of they're juxtaposed with each other in action sequences. And, so kind of theoretically it makes sense, on paper it makes sense. But then you have Cavill with the worst haircut I've ever seen in a major star in a cinema, wearing ill-fitting clothes that make him look fat, right? So
the clothes weren't
those
great,
things bothered me, really.
There was dialogue that pointed out the clothes at one point, something about the suits that he wears, and I thought the suit didn't look great though. It didn't. There was one particular shot, a full body shot of him stood there, and it didn't look great. And I thought that's an error,
Well, for a Kingsman film that pays so much attention to British tailoring, and, things being so precise, and
needed to be better than that.
Yeah,
the haircut I liked. I thought it's silly. Liked it.
I didn't. I thought it made him look unattractive, and it's a really bad haircut.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, not in terms of what he's meant to represent. It's not great.
Yeah.
You know, you might get a kick out of seeing Henry Cavill look ugly,
I
but
don't think he
you
looked
know that's
ugly.
not what the film is meant to do with
I
that.
don't think he looked ugly. He looked kind of daft. I mean, the film is not just parodying or kind of building on kind of Bond and spies, although it's mostly doing that. There's an element of kind of 80s action in there as well, and that haircut comes straight from that. You know.
No 80s film star looked as bad as Henry Cavill does in this movie.
Well, okay, whatever. I don't think it's a minor point.
I don't think it's a minor point. I think it's part of what's wrong with the film. Yeah, that kind of it's not paying attention to those things, and it has an idea that then it kind of executes very poorly, and that is it. I mean, if you're going to have Henry Cavill as the Bond, sleek, sexy spy, then you don't dress him like that, and you don't give him that haircut. It destroys the concept.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I disagree with you that it destroyed the concept, but fine. What about Bryce Dallas Howard? You know, I kind of want to be sensitive about how I say this, but I like the fact that a woman who is of a normal human size is allowed to appear on screen, allowed to do action, allowed to be a sexy, you know, by the end when she's wearing that dress. You know, I really like that. It just, because I'm not calling her fat. I'm saying that she just like looks like a normal person, a body type and body size, and I like and I think she looks great. And I was distracted by how beautiful she was at points.
Well, again, I didn't feel the same way. I thought there was a lot of hiding of her weight, of wearing blankets and things like that. I thought the scene, particularly when she goes from being the shy librarian, to being the action kind of star, I thought her makeup didn't do her any favors. I hated those leggings that she wore throughout. But
leggings? The jeans?
Yeah. No, when she wore dresses and she wore stockings over them, right? Which were very unflattering. And I think kind of the worst bit for me was, so there used to be a real pleasure in seeing Jackie Gleason in The Honeymooners, right? Because he was very fat, but he was immensely agile, right? And he would knock you out, really. But, with his flexibility and his movement, he just moves so beautifully, right? And so the thing with Bryce Dallas Howard in this film is that she doesn't, she waddles through it.
Yeah, I love that.
I didn't. Okay, well, there you go.
I love that,
Well, she's meant to be an action star.
She doesn't waddle later on.
Well, she does. Those scenes with the gold lame dressing gown, she's running, and kind of she'd be taken out in a nanosecond. So, I thought it was an interesting idea, right? To have, like you said, someone normal size be kind of like an action star. But I think she needs to have moved better than she does in this film to accomplish that, or to convince me of that.
Yeah, all right. I mean, the thing is, she becomes an action star, like, in terms of her character fully adopting and, the whole thing is her getting her memory back of her having been a spy previously. And it's not an instant thing. It takes time for her to rebuild that confidence. And by the time she does towards the end, which I think really comes to, like, full fruition in those scenes, the smoke gunfire battle and the skating scenes.
The skating was the best scene.
That's when that's at its kind of full fruition, and that's when she's moving the best.
Well, yes. I mean, I think in the skating rink, in the skating thing, definitely. And actually, that brings up, again, kind of the problems with her movement on her feet as opposed to her movement in her skates. I thought she was great in the skates, really.
Yeah, well, that's assuming she did any of the skating. I mean, one thing, and in fact, I kind of mentioned this when we were talking about Wonka, was the way British CGI looks, in particular. There's a particular phoniness to the way British CGI looks, and I really associate it with Matthew Vaughn's films in particular. It happens quite a bit in Kingsman, because he orchestrates these quite elaborate and thought through action scenes. If you think about the Kingsman films, you've got the one which is supposed to look like a single take in the church where he murders everybody. You've got the bar scene, which they kind of reenact once or twice throughout the films, where, manners maketh man, and then he beats up everyone in the pub. I love the ideas of these scenes, and I do like the way they look in some respects, and I like the way they're executed. But there's a way in which the camera is constantly moving. You can tell it's not just it. You can see how things have been sort of stitched together. You can not see exactly. Not like you can say, oh yeah, they've done this, this, and this. But you can tell that things have been stitched together in the way that any film is stitching, kind of visual elements together in post-production to make these things happen. But there's something much more obvious about the way it looks in these films. And it happens here as well. I mean, that whole opening scene, you've got an awful lot of that, of shots of Argylle. I can't remember the shots exactly, but it's things like the camera tracking in and tracking out, and you know that they're kind of manipulating visual elements in order to composite all this, but it just doesn't look right.
No, to me, it has a... I mean, I was surprised by the budget because, to me it has kind of a cheap look. And I think by what I'm meaning by cheap is a little bit what you're meaning. So on the one hand, it's meant to be these very rich, glossy-looking places and furniture, and it's meant to have a rich look, and yet it feels thin and stitched together somehow. I can't be more precise than that, but it looked a little bit like it was over CGI'd cheaply.
I continue to have this problem with these films, and this is another example of it. The thing is, I really didn't like it when it was, that opening scene, for instance. When you got to the scene with the smoke, which again is like obviously very fake smoke, I really enjoyed it because I enjoyed the way it looked, and I liked the fact that it had this really clear sense of what the scene was supposed to be, and the fact that you're not going to be able to do that as well or as clearly with real smoke, especially the fact that the smoke is so richly coloured. I really enjoyed it. So like there are times when it came around to me, and also I suppose that I think the thing is that the smoke, and I suppose the oil as well in the skating scene, is so clearly a computer generated element of the image that I don't mind it. Whereas when it's real shots, of people that have been kind of put together and stitched together and things, it's harder to get that past you in a sense. Whereas when something just starts off as obviously CGI, I kind of don't mind that it's then CGI throughout. You've kicked it off by being that way. And I kind of, did I mind the fact that the cat appears to never be a real cat? It's constantly CGI.
That I didn't mind.
Maybe it's okay again that the cat is just like, even when it's not doing stuff that you would not put the cat in the scene for because it's too dangerous. So obviously you're going to insert a digital model there. But like, it's the cat jumping up on the table and Sam Rockwell playing with it. Like, you don't need to have a computer generated cat for that, but I think they did, and maybe that's okay.
Yeah, it must have been, and I didn't mind that at all. Actually, I thought. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying about the scene, the shootout with all the multicolored smoke, because I love the concept and I love the look, but there was something about the movement that felt a bit jiggery. The movement of the actors that wasn't precise, and that it felt like I loved the idea of it, but I just wish they'd taken greater care, and kind of brought out more qualities in their concept, that kind of were there to be brought out. It kind of, it lacked a certain precision and elegance, really, even though the concept was great, and I liked the scene very much. I also thought it's kind of, it's not quite right, and that's maybe something about Matthew Vaughn's films in general, really.
I know what you mean, but that concept is really strong for me, and it works throughout. And the idea of this kind of basically a love scene. You end up with the smoke in the shape of a heart, and they're dancing romantically through it. Well, romantically, but they're dancing together. Kind of in an orchestrated manner. They know what each other's doing, and they're fighting together, and then they incorporate murdering lots and lots of henchmen into this. I think it's just a wonderful idea, and I do like the way it's played, and I found it really funny. I was laughing through it, and in fact, Sam Rockwell really made me laugh pretty much throughout. I think he's such a good actor.
He is such a good actor.
He's got a great presence in this. I like the transitions the film does in the kind of early section when you don't really know what's going on, and Ellie, the Bryce Dallas Howard character, is finding herself in over her head. And when she sees this action taking place in front of her on the train and in that room, you switch back and forth. She imagines Henry Cavill, Argylle, in the place of Sam Rockwell's Aidan. And then you switch back and forth, and it's done with blinks. You can see from her perspective the camera, like it blinks in front of you, right? It goes black and switches actor. And I like the idea. I think it's executed quite well. And then what I really like and what made me laugh is how she imagines Henry Cavill he's always looking at her for one thing. Like it's the action, like he's doing the action for her.
Cavill's very good also at
Yeah.
playing that up. Really.
And he's aware of her, and he's doing it he almost has a smirk on his face the whole time. He's very competent and so on. And then you'll cut back essentially to Sam Rockwell, and he's getting the shit beaten out. So he's doing effectively the same thing, but he is not sort of suave and smooth and stuff, because he's actually getting the shit beaten out of him, and he's not fit. You know what I mean? Like there's that shot where he gets exploded through the wall by the grenade, and he lands in the chair, and Cavill lands in the chair, and he's quite smooth with it. And you cut back to Sam Rockwell, and he's got this ridiculous look on his face because he's just been exploded by a grenade.
I thought that was very good.
I think it's really funny. I really enjoyed that. And Sam Rockwell, and then he dances, and you don't see much of it, but I love the way he dances when he's luring her onto the dance floor. Sam Rockwell is a wonderful bad dancer. He's so free in all his films. He does it a lot. He's a very funny, free dancer.
Well, I thought part of the problem with Bryce Dallas Howard as an action star was also indicated by, that the way that the dance was filmed, because it's all upper body. It's like, you never really see her move until that last shot where she's got her legs kind of,
when she's up on his shoulders.
Yes, splayed out. But, that's a scene of movement in which kind of you don't get to see the movement. You get to see the last bit of each movement. And I thought kind of so much of it in close-up was a mistake.
I'm trying to think of why people are being so mean or dismissive or whatever to this film online. Because I think if you let a lot of things go and just allow the film to be kind of a mess and kind of wacky, which I think it is, I think you can really get into it, as I did. And I wonder whether people are getting so obsessed with the reality, quote unquote, of what the film is telling us. So basically, there's a whole question throughout of who is Argylle, and this question kind of keeps coming back, because although it is ultimately established that Argylle is Ellie Conway and her real name is Rachel Kyle, so R. Kyle, and that's the reveal, which I don't mind. I don't mind a silly name reveal sometimes. Right at the very end of the film, when you think everything's kind of been settled, Rachel there is giving another book reading, and we see Henry Cavill in the real world with long scraggly hair, and he doesn't look right, but it's still clearly Henry Cavill. He stands up and is indicating that he is real in some way. And of course that's the cliffhanger or the weirdness that the film ends on. And then there's a mid-credit scene which is setting the film within, to some extent, the Kingsman universe, such as it is, which is set 20 years ago, and in which, in a pub, the King's Man, a young lad, it gives like a code word, receives a silenced pistol, and says that his name is Argylle. So there's some reality going on here somewhere along the line. And I think people are getting very obsessed with that. It's a real kind of hangover of the MCU and that sort of thing, of like, how is this all going to tie in, and what's the reality, and what does this plot detail mean, and so on. That I think a kind of a looser viewing of the film doesn't bother you. It doesn't bother me what the reality is going to be. Maybe, if they make another film, if it's all revealed, if it's developed, I'll see it and whatever. But I'm not going to obsess about it until that happens.
Well, the thing is, it's a very derivative film.
Yeah,
right?
hugely.
So you were mentioning earlier A Kiss...
The Long Kiss Goodnight.
The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Which you've just been watching.
Yeah. It borrows a certain premise for that, the amnesia, the secret agent, the Samuel L. Jackson, you said. It's also very much Romancing the Stone, where Kathleen Turner is this kind of novelist who fantasizes, her ideal romance. And it just feels kind of derivative and cheap, really.
It's hugely derivative, but I really didn't mind that.
Yeah, well, kind of, I think the reason why people are being so hard on it is that it's derivative, that it has a kind of a cheapness around it, right? And that includes the cast, I think, because, on the one hand, it's an all-star cast, but it's a kind of a low-wattage all-star cast. It's kind of Bryan Cranston, right? The one I liked best was Sofia Boutella. The thing about Vaughn, I suppose, at this moment is that he is beginning to have a world peopled by these characters. Yeah, Sofia Boutella, Samuel Jackson, etc. And again, the look of it aims to be slick and glamorous, but it isn't quite. It's a bit kind of tacky looking.
I think that's a little unfair, but I do know what you mean. Tacky, I think, is a little too much.
Well, I'm just following up on your point of why people don't like it, and I suspect, and the length, bloody hell, it's long.
How long is it, I wonder? Because I didn't feel it was long, and this is something that I think it's 2 hours 20.
It's long.
Yeah, but I didn't feel it. That's the thing, and maybe that's another thing. Is if you're into it, you don't feel it, and if you're not into it, you do.
Yeah,
But I do think that. So it's interesting. Is the film a parody of the things it's showing, or is it actually doing it? And I think what's interesting is that it's kind of both, and the fact that it doesn't flag up quite obviously that it's spoofing to some extent what it's showing you is, I think, something that people are then taking a little more seriously than they otherwise would. For instance, you got the scene where Catherine O'Hara and Bryan Cranston it is revealed that they're not her real parents, and they're in fact the big baddies who we're going to have to deal with. And when Catherine O'Hara puts a gun to Bryce Dallas Howard's head and then says lines like, I can't hardly remember what they are, but it's something like, I will enjoy killing you, something like that. It's like, it is so over the top. It is such a silly, spy-y line.
She's great.
Then I thought, okay, this is obvious parody. It's very funny. Although we are meant to take this seriously insofar as the film is actually showing us this plot development, it's also silly. And the film kind of knows that it's silly and spy movie-ish. And I think the fact that it only does that a little bit and doesn't go full-throated on the parody means that people are kind of thinking it's just a bad spy movie instead of a knowing parody to some extent.
I don't know, because the thing is, it's part of the Kingsman universe. All the Kingsman films are spoofs. So, why people wouldn't expect this to be a spoof,
but I think they the same.
Me.
I think they the same they spoof elements, but they also build on them. I think those films are genuinely trying to excite you with a spy narrative.
I think the first one tread that line much better than this one does.
Yeah, fair enough.
But
I think that's interesting, and I think that's something people aren't responding to, and I think actually that's more their fault than the films for just being a little unfair to it.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a mess of a film.
It's what?
It's a mess of a film, I think.
Yeah.
So it's not people's fault that this kind of really long spoof with great ideas that are not very well executed is like
I didn't think it was a mess as much as
trial
anyone else.
to watch.
I didn't think it was a mess as much as anyone else. That's the thing. It's like I wouldn't then go and say it achieves everything it means to with perfect clarity or something like that. I wouldn't say that either. But I don't think it's as much of a mess as you think. I think it's kind of the film it intends to be. The fact that it has so many twists and they keep on coming, I think is part of that. Is it a parody? Is it not? It is genuinely giving you twist after twist, but it's also parodying the fact that these films are full of twists.
I mean, I did enjoy quite a lot of things on it. The moment where John Cena picks up Dua Lipa from the motorcycle, the fight on the train. That fight sequence with the neon smoke and the skating scene, I very much enjoyed all of those. But the film also lost me at various times.
Yeah.
And I did kind of look at my watch, really. I did find it long. So
I think there are definitely times where it could do with a little less exposition. There are one or two points where it's handled. So essentially, the point where it is revealed to her who her original real identity is, and then you get Sam Rockwell having to deliver quite a lot of dialogue to get this through, and it takes a long time to do that, and it feels. That scene, that whole segment which is where you meet Samuel L. Jackson, starts off in a kind of ominous way when you've got her meeting Samuel L. Jackson. His name is it's the same as the cat's. Alfie, yeah. And and then she goes, Alfie Solomon, you're the former deputy director of the CIA, and it's like there's another way to deliver that line, deliver that information, and so it starts off. You go, okay, well that was pretty clunky, and then more clunkiness in that scene is yet to come.
Yeah, and
so
the last fight on the battleship was quite clunky. I mean, that should have been more romantic, more intense, more threatening. And it wasn't. And, I didn't find Bryce Dallas Howard particularly convincing, switching from one persona to the other.
Well, it's a scene in which you never are convinced that the worst thing could happen. That's a problem.
True.
You know.
Yeah. So this is a film I would not recommend, though. You know.
That's ridiculous. Not recommend.
I would not.
After some of the shit we've seen lately, and you said go and see it.
Well, but this one I feel don't. I think if it happens to be on TV, I think people will enjoy some scenes and they can drift in and out of it and kind of, enjoy whatever moment they find enjoyable. But I did find it a bit of a trial to sit through at the cinema.
Fair enough. I had a really good time. I liked it much more than I expected I would. Thank you to everyone on Twitter for giving me the lowest expectations possible, because it's not as bad as all you fucking idiots think. It's fine. It's really fun. It's incredibly... That's, again, the thing with Matthew Vaughn's films, is they always turn out to be incredibly watchable. And I've had the experience of Kingsman and the various Kingsman sequels having been on TV, and I sit through them. Layer Cake, not so much. I mean, that one is fucking incomprehensible. And I mean, that one really is sub Guy Ritchie, because it's like London gangster stuff, and you think Guy Ritchie is so much better than this. But the rest of Matthew Vaughn's films I'm really alright with, and this is another one.
I largely feel that way about all of them, including Layer Cake, but this one lost me, so...
yeah.
But there you go, so a divided podcast.
Certainly. I have one thing of the MCU obsessive what is the real truth thing, which is now that because in that post-credits scene the film reasonably explicitly is setting itself in the Kingsman world. Samuel L. Jackson has already been in the Kingsman world. He was the villain in the first one. And so are we expected to believe there are two Samuel L. Jacksons now? And is that going to come back? I mean, dual identities and shit?
Well, it looks like there might not be a sequel to kind of let us know.
Well, that's true. Yeah. The film continues to do badly.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.